Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. My guest today is Stephen Shedletzky, who helps leaders listen to and nurture the voice of others. He supports humble leaders, those who know they are both part of the problems they experience and the solutions they can create, as they put their people and their purpose first. Now, he's a sought-after speaker, a coach, an advisor. He's led hundreds of keynote presentations, workshops, leadership development programs all around the world. As a thought leader on psychological safety in the workplace, he supports leaders and organizations in all industries where human beings work. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Speak Up Culture. Speak Up Culture. When leaders truly listen, people step up. I'm so excited to talk about this because I have this notion that the more people become leaders, the closer you get to the head of the table, the more you're expected to talk, the harder it gets to carve out time to listen. So after years on the corporate track, Shed was introduced to and inspired by the work of Simon Sinek, and soon after meeting him became the fourth person to join his team. We can talk a little bit about that as well. For more than a decade, he contributed to Simon Sinek Inc., where as chief of staff and head of brand experience training and development, he headed a global team of speakers and facilitators. He continues to work with Simon to this day, helping create a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world. And he lives in Toronto with his wife and his two young children. So Shed, welcome to Big Talk.
Thank you so much. It was great to join early LGO because we did not have small talk. It was not, how's the weather? We covered some pretty deep things pretty quickly. So on brand.
We did. Yes, we did. We did. I did learn from you that it is raining in Toronto. So we talked a little bit about the weather, but the rain was really more about the mood that you are feeling right now, having lost your wife's grandmother recently. And, I have been to a number of funerals in my day, as I'm sure you have, and I always sort of feel like the rainy ones are the most appropriate ones. It just feels right in some way.
Yeah. Fortunately, when we buried her on a beautiful, crisp, sunny day, which was lovely because she loved flowers and gardens. So fortunately, it was beautiful the day we put her to rest, but rainy today, and it would have been her 98th birthday today. So
Yes.
fitting.
Well, there's an expression I'm sure in the Jewish religion, may her memory be a blessing. And, the first time I heard that, I was like, damn it, I don't want their memory be a blessing. That's terrible. I want them here. I want them present. I want them. And then over time, having lost a number of people close to me and getting together with other people and telling stories about that person, it's like, really, that memory really is a blessing. It really is wonderful to have that. And so, this idea of it being rainy there on her 90th birthday, and it just sort of setting the mood for like a little bit of a bittersweet, somber memorial.
Well, you speak as well to legacy. And working with Simon in Simon's latest book, The Infinite Game, that if you live life and career properly, we all die. While life is infinite, our lives are finite.
Yes.
It's James Carson's work. While careers are infinite, our career is finite. And if we do it right, we have legacy. Like my grandfather, huge impact on me. He died also just before his 99th birthday, Holocaust survivor. I keep little things around me. Here's his initial ring that he gave to me literally on his deathbed when we told him that we were pregnant with our first. Like, just amazing. And though he physically is not here, I literally think about him every single day, and his memory is a blessing. And I view it as my responsibility to make choices in my life that honors his legacy, will make him proud. And I have some funny stories on that. When I left a corporate job and he called me and said, "What are you doing? Do you know how many sacrifices I made to give you a good quality of life?" And I said, we called him Zadie. I said, "Zadie, I'm doing this because I'm following in your footsteps. You are an entrepreneur. I'm going to embrace that journey. I'm doing this because of you." And that shut him up real quick. And then he said, "Fine, just don't sell drugs." And I went, "No problem. No problem."
No problem. Okay, so I'm not going to work on the corner, and I'm not going to in the pharmaceutical industry. Like that'll cover
Yeah.
the whole span. So, I want to talk a little bit about the topic of your next book about leaders and how what leaders can do to create a culture where people can speak up. And so, I think that there's a great segue from your Zadie into this, because we all do have people in our world, whether they're related to us or whether they're in the next cubicle or in the corner office, who impact us and who are role models. And for 20 years, when I did executive search, I used to always ask people whether there was a grandparent or a coach or a school nurse or somebody on television or somebody who sort of impacted them and
Mm,
gave them a sense of who they wanted to be and what direction they wanted their life to go. And I think that leaders, especially now when we're coming out of a global pandemic and people are asking themselves, when life goes back to normal, is the normal I'm going back to the life I want? I think there's
mm,
a real role for leaders to sort of step in and show their full humanity
mm.
and really create that, not just the role model experience for people who work with them, but also just creating a culture where people can talk about values and what it means to them to do work that actually matters.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think anyone who's waiting for things to get back to normal will be waiting a very long time.
Yes.
The world has, humanity's experience of the world has changed fundamentally through
Yes.
COVID. Our definition of work, for the most part, has shifted. There's a wonderful power shift, more so to the employee with the
Hmm.
great resignation. So, I think anyone who's waiting for it to go back to normal will be waiting a long time. And leaders are the ones who embrace present and who lead people, themselves included, into the future. But yeah, I mean, every one of us needs a role model. Everyone. There's a brilliant TED talk by an educator. I forget her name. She's since passed. Where she shared a wonderful TED talk on every child, every single person needs a role model. That's inclusive of leaders. So many people, especially in this startup world where, you have these some 20, 25, 30-year-old CEO startup founders who are totally punching above their weight class. You need role models, you need coaches, you need friends, you need people that you can look up to and go, I want me some of that.
Yes.
And I'm not so much a believer at LGO in right way and wrong way. There's your way. What are your values? What's your scorecard? What's more important to profit for you? And then how do you make decisions in your leadership, in your business, and for your people that represent that? And then, yeah, I mean, we can talk tons about a speak up culture and how leaders do cultivate it. I've learned that the two fundamental pieces of a speak up culture are encourage and reward. So first and foremost, a speak up culture is one in which there is psychological safety. I like the good old Zig Ziglar quote, people don't buy drills, they buy holes. And so I'm a believer that the drill is psychological safety. There's brilliant work done by Amy Edmondson. I know both you and I are fans of Amy and her work. Brilliant work. The output of having psychological safety is you get a speak up culture. And a speak up culture doesn't mean that we only talk about rainbow, sunshine, unicorns, and lollipops. That's toxic positivity, which Susan David has done some great work on toxic positivity. That's when we can only talk about the future and only talk about good things.
Hmm.
Well, it's been a hard couple of years. Are we allowed to have grief at work? Are we allowed to have sadness and depression and anxiety and concern? Because if we go no, or if we say yes, but don't actually acknowledge people's feelings when they show up, good luck to you in that culture. That is not a healthy culture.
Right, right. So let's look at two models, right? So
Mm.
there's Alan Mullally, right, who famously saved Boeing, famously saved Ford. He had this working together idea. I interviewed him on the podcast last year, I think, and the idea behind it is that everybody works together to solve problems. So he'd have these huge meetings, these board meetings at Ford, and he would have people talk about the problems they were having. And at first, like everything was green across the board, nobody was talking about any problems. And he was like, "We're losing billions of dollars every single year. It can't all be green." And finally, after meeting after meeting after meeting, somebody somebody raises their hand, is like, I got a little problem. And
Yellow.
then they saw yellow, and then everybody came together and they solved the problem. And he was like, and I know what everyone was thinking, that the doors of the Thunderbird room would open and these giant hulking guys would come in and extract them and throw them off a cliff. But the next meeting, he moved this manager closer to him, right?
Mm.
So he encouraged and then he rewarded.
Yep.
Then you have, on the other hand, Elon Musk, who's like, everyone has to come back to the office, and
Mhm.
I don't even care if you don't like it. You got to be here for at least 40 hours a week. And if you don't like it, just pretend you work somewhere else. Okay, so those are two very different models.
Yep.
But Elon is getting a lot of praise for being this like brilliant visionary. So
Mhm.
what do like 20 and 30-year-old CEOs who are punching above their weight class do
Yeah.
when that's like the zeitgeisty, this is what a leader is, when in fact that's the opposite of what's going to create any sort of safety, psychological or otherwise?
Yeah. Do you know what Mullally said, by the way, in his press conference when he took the job? He was asked what car do you drive, and he said Alexis because it's the best car on the road,
Yes,
which I
yes,
loved. It was a call to action of like, we're bleeding money, people, like let's go,
yes.
which I loved. So I mean, I will, and I posted about this last week when with the news with Musk came out, back-to-back days of everyone must return to the office, not just executives, everyone, all salaried workers, or no, all workers, everyone. Then
Everyone.
next day there's an announced projected 10% layoff of salaried workers, to which now the race is on. Who's going to get there first? The number of resignations, or will Musk get to lay off that 10%? I will give Musk credit for one thing and one thing only: transparency. That's it. At least he's being clear. Because now, if I worked at Tesla or if I was interviewing, I'd go, not for me. Right? I give him credit and I give Tesla credit for that, and that's it. Um, uh, Otherwise, not much. I don't think it's the best move.
Or,
Uh,
as you said, there may be people for whom that is absolutely the place they want to be,
yep.
right? There isn't a right or a wrong. For me, that just seems like mind-bogglingly torturous.
But
But
yeah, I'd rather that though than the alternative. I've heard of many organizations that have said we fully embrace remote and hybrid work, and it is but a line.
mm,
And people internally are still going in, are still playing the quote unquote game. And
yes,
and people who say, okay, great, I will embrace hybrid work and remote work, and they're being left out of meetings and being punished. And
yes.
so would I rather Musk's transparency, and this is what it is, choose on or off? Or would I rather we're like a family here, right? And there's a total
Yeah.
incongruence between what is said and what is done.
So that's interesting because in a way, his transparency about what feels like an abusive policy is in fact more psychologically safe than a business that's like, yeah, we absolutely support paternity leave. But yeah, oh, you're going to be one of those dads? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, you like no one at Tesla can now say, what happened to my remote job?
Right.
Like that's not fair. It's like, well, and fortunately, now the issue is a lot of people look to Tesla.
Yes.
However, last I checked, there's more than one employer. Last I
Right.
checked.
Right.
And so though you and I are often in front of audiences and working with people, you and I would never, I would hope I would never give someone counsel, you should quit your job. That's not for you or I to do. That's for someone to make that choice. But fortunately, there's other employers, and people can vote with their feet, physically or virtually, and go work where they want to work. And
Yes.
I think there will be organizations that will prevail and be better places to work, and by virtue create better results because they embrace flexibility, they embrace a healthy culture with psychological safety.
Hmm. Okay, so if you are a leader and you're listening and you're like, I don't know how to manage all of this, right? Like I am, people keep coming to me for the answers.
Mm.
I don't
Hmm.
have the answers, but they keep wanting me to speak, right? How do you encourage your people to speak up more? I know when I ran my search firm, I would ask people questions and I would watch them before they'd answer. And you could tell they were doing the calculus about, like, what does Laura want me to say?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what is she waiting for me to tell her? And then they would try to give me that answer. And it was not helpful for
Yeah.
me at all, because it didn't help me to solve the problems. It didn't help me to understand what inspired them as workers. I couldn't figure out how to get them engaged if they thought that they had to give me a certain line. And so we were just talking past each other.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, you remind me of a story that I'll share, of a senior leader who totally missed the mark in an event that I spoke at, and I was so disappointed. So I'll just say that so that you remind me to speak to
Yes.
that. The other is leaders. So there's no mistake, Laura, that every single leadership development program that I've ever heard of, witnessed, participated in, or facilitated in has all started with a module on leading self. Every single one, self-awareness. Leaders need to understand their own instrument before they can dare help others play theirs.
Yes.
And part of that is, for you, higher D on the disc scale, likely be brief, be gone. You care about brevity, results. Let's go, right? And so for you to say to your people, I'm going to ask you questions. I might ask you questions that you don't know the answer to. If you don't know the answer or you need to think, let's create a code word like pause or tippy tree or lemon tree or whatever, tippy toe. That's a Seinfeld reference for anyone listening. That way, if someone goes, oh, that's a great question, I haven't thought about that, can we speak on our next one-on-one about that, right? Because I don't know right now. And rather than feeding you BS and playing this game where I'm speaking here and you're speaking there, I need to think. And so part of that is leaders having awareness of what are their own blind spots, such that their work with others is a partnership as opposed to a tyrancy. Not that that would ever be a leader's intention. Most leaders, that would be most leaders' intention. So I think one is a self-awareness and knowing, how am I as a leader actually getting in the way of people sharing their truth or sharing too much or whatever it might be. So I think that's one piece. Another, so I spoke at an event. It was virtual. It was a all managers event. 1,500 people joined. Organization size was about 10,000. They do a very important job in the United States of America, keeping the United States safe. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
And the executive sponsor who brought us in, I had a pre-engagement call with him. He seemed lovely. We listened to the same podcasts. Like, he really seemed like a wonderful dude. I'm sure he is a nice, lovely man. He gave his remarks before me. As often as I can, I like to join early and hear the comments before mine. It really helps for what I do thereafter. He gave, typical organizational updates, and then he opened up to an AMA, ask me anything. And the second question, which was asked anonymously, was what is being done to address manager and worker overload and burnout? To which this individual said, well, we've done these initiatives. I'm quite pleased with them. I don't think it's an issue.
Oh, if it wasn't an issue,
It
you wouldn't
wouldn't
have gotten that question.
And so it was such a wonderful and awful display of, well, my experience is we've addressed it, so it's a non-issue. And it's like,
Yes.
no, you're not allowed to say you have a great culture if you're a senior leader. You're allowed to say what makes you proud about the culture, but you can't just declare we have a great culture. You know, your view is not the whole view. A whisper is a shout as a leader, and the more senior you are, the further away you can get from the truth. And so what that leader should have done in that moment is to say, well, these are the initiatives that we've done. I'm quite proud on the progress that I've seen here, here, and here. But the mere fact that you've had to ask this question means that we have more work to do. And now we're on a quest to learn more. So thank you for the courage to bring up that question. I'm sorry you've had to ask it. Let's dig in and let's figure out what more is the issue here. Maybe we need to launch another survey. Maybe we need to do more training. But thank you, and let's dig in.
It's that's such an that's such a, like, a record scratch moment for me,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of leaders do say we have a great culture, and And I hadn't actually thought about it in the way that you present it, which isn't we have a great culture, but here's what I'm proud that we're working towards, and what I love about what's important in our culture, and I want to make sure that our actions actually are in service of that, because
Yep.
I do think saying we have a great culture not only makes you look out of touch if there's not, but it also really dampens the enthusiasm of anyone who doesn't feel that way, because they're probably like, is it just me? Am I the only one? Is it, or maybe I don't get it, or maybe I don't belong here? Like it is more than just tone deaf. It's damaging.
Well, it's like it's the same way as me as a father being like, my kids, they love me. Like I'm the best dad. Look, I've got all these awards,
Yes.
and it's like, oh, versus I'm so proud to be a dad. Those
Yes.
moments when I have those moments of connection with my kids, or I'll watch them doing, like I'm so proud as a dad, right?
Yes.
Now, it isn't static. Even if I win a culture award or a dad award, my work isn't done. It's constantly dynamic and evolving, you know? And so I think there's a way in which you can speak to, this is what makes me proud to work here and be a leader here, and my work is never done.
Yes.
And
Yes.
our work is never done.
Yes.
And there is no such thing as a perfect leader or a perfect organization, none whatsoever. The telltale sign of a speak up culture and psychological safety is, does it feel worth the risk to have a conversation of candor with care? And on the other side is improvement. As soon as we lose, as soon as like, it's not worth speaking up, it's only going to make things worse. Urgh.
Right, right, right. So let's talk a little bit about those two things. Is it worth the risk, and is there improvement on the other side?
Yeah.
So if you are somewhere and there isn't a speak up culture,
Mhm.
but you believe that your boss really does want to do the right thing, they just don't know how. I mean, let's face it, most bosses didn't go to boss school, right? Most bosses did a job
Yep.
fairly well, and they got promoted to manage other people doing that job fairly well, and then they got promoted again, and at some point, right, Peter principle, whatever you want to call it, you get to a point where you don't know how to do the job that you've been promoted into. You know how to do the jobs of the people that you're managing, so you end up
Yep.
micromanaging, or you end up not being a leader. You end up being a micromanager, not just a manager. So if you know that your boss really does have the best intentions and they want to be a better boss, but they just don't know how to do it, how do you determine A, if it's worth the risk, and B, if you can help them get to where they need to get to?
I mean, it is not your job to do the transformation and growing for another. That's impossible. You can lead a
Right. But
horse
if
to
you're
water.
working somewhere, you either have to leave or you have to figure out how to do it. Right.
Sure, sure. But in the situation that you describe, where it seems like you have a pretty earnest individual, like the boss that you described, though they're doing some things, you and I spoke how the villain could actually be inside of us.
Right.
Ooh,
Right.
right?
Before
Like,
we got on, we were
yeah.
talking about how we all create these deadlines for ourselves and create our own enemies inside.
And despite our best interests, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Oftentimes we can be our own
Yes.
worst enemy. But the sort of vision that I had in my head when you were describing this boss was that they seem to be quite earnest and humble, which means you can have a human relationship with your boss. And let's game this out. Let's say I report into you. You've just received a new promotion to now vice president. You've been promoted to your level of incompetence,
Yes.
yet we have a good relationship. And I could say, LGO, I'm trembling on the inside, daring to risk to have this conversation, but I want to do it because I have trust, respect, and care for you. And I know that if the roles were reversed, I'd want you to tell me the same. Can we go there? I'm really afraid that what I might say might get me punished, but it's worth the risk for me because I believe in you. You are doing some things that are getting in your way. You've now been promoted to a level where micromanagement is no longer the best strategy. And if you're willing, I'd like to have a conversation of feedback to help you and ergo all of us improve. You want to go there? Now
So you're
that's
gonna get one of two answers. You're gonna get a yes, please, or you're gonna get a what the fuck are you talking about?
well, you'll
Right?
you'll 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 get a yes, no, maybe.
Okay.
right?
But the yes may also be like a yes, I think.
That's a
Yeah,
maybe.
that's a maybe. Okay.
That's a maybe. And a maybe is like so you'll either get yes, please, thank you, and now you can go, listen, what I'm not saying is fact, it is but opinion. But here are some things that I'm noticing, feedback, FBI, feeling behavior impact. You can go in there, and have a great conversation. No is how dare you, right? No is you can't challenge my authority. You know the seat that I'm in, and
No
that's
is
like,
you're just jealous that I got the promotion and you didn't.
yeah, yeah, and there I would say that is psychological manipulation and denial. You can give them a day to cool off and see if they apologize and say, "I'm really sorry. I really want that feedback. You just triggered me." Okay, or leave and create distance. Go to a
Mm.
different team. Go to a better leader, or jump ship. Um,
Yeah, because
it,
the person has to have a pretty strong ego to A, believe that they're capable of the promotion, right? So like they're gunning, they're growing. You have to have a strong ego, but you also have to have a strong enough ego to withstand the I might not be perfect. Right. So it's a specific type of person who'd be willing to hear this.
Sure, humility. Um, you know, uh, ego confidence is important. Ego confidence derailing becomes arrogance, which is just a really ugly, loud form of insecurity.
Insecurity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Which can allow us to have some empathy for those who display arrogance. Is it's really just loud insecurity. But yeah, I mean, in theory, it should be the job of the leader's leader to provide them with that feedback. But oftentimes the leader's leader doesn't really know what's going on, which is why I'm a really big fan of peer review.
Yes.
There's an organization out of New York called Next Jump. They evaluate their leaders 50% on performance and results and 50% on contribution to culture and a service orientation.
Mm.
There's an example of one vice president who had top marks on performance and very bottom, lowest of the low marks on culture. And they were demoted based on peer review, saying you can no longer have a leadership role. If you'd like, you can stay here. You're welcome to. But on one condition, you must re-enroll in our leadership boot camp, learn what it truly means to be a leader here. That's the condition of you staying as an individual contributor. You will not be responsible for any other people until you earn it. And they went, okay. And within
Yeah.
years, they re-earned that VP role and understood how to actually do it properly.
Years ago, when I ran my search firm, I did not understand this. I would hire, I would be hired by my clients to find and recruit away on their behalf some of the most successful people in the world, and I was very good at finding the right people on paper, interviewing them, understanding if they'd be a culture fit for the organizations in which I was placing them.
Mhm.
On my own team, cobbler's children had no shoes, and I would hire people who were like gunners. They were, selling work. They were making it rain. They were closing the deal. They were closing the searches. They were just go, 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 go. They were performers.
Mhm.
And then I looked around one day and I was like, why does my culture suck? Like, why is everybody like, what's in it for me? And I brought in all this money. And how come you didn't give me the biggest bonus? And it just felt very selfish and very what have you done for me lately was like
Yeah.
all I was getting all the time. And I turned my company in a place that I didn't enjoy working because I didn't
Mm.
enjoy the culture. And I sat down with a business coach and he was like, all right, he's like, well, tell me about your people. And it turns out that there was one person who was a top performer but who was very much just in it for herself.
Yep.
And that was the day that I realized that we needed to create a culture document. Like, what does it mean to be a good, quote unquote, citizen of our firm, right?
Right.
Citizen of our community. And we started giving people bonuses based on not just performance, but how they contributed to everybody else's work. And it was very difficult for a lot of people because the traditional search firms don't work that way. They work
Mhm.
very much like siloed environments. A lot of sales, any sales role is like, what have you done? It's just you, single contributor. So it was very difficult to switch the culture midstream once I realized that the culture that I had built was one that was super profitable, but it was really toxic. And by the time it took several years, by the time we turned it into a much more community culture, we ended up becoming even more profitable at the end of the day because people felt really great, which is, obviously the business case lesson there. But
Yeah.
the transition was hard, and it was really scary to let go of the high performing toxic person,
Yeah.
because I was wondering what was going to happen to our P&L.
Mm-hmm. So there's a matrix that the U.S. Navy SEALs use to select people who join the teams. I mean, this is one of the most elite, high-performing teams in the world. If they don't
Yes.
do the job, people die. Bad,
Yes.
right? And so they have a matrix called the Trust and Performance Matrix. It's a 3x3 matrix. So top right is high performance, high trust. We all want high performers of high trust
Yes.
in our team, of course. No one wants the low performer of low trust, of course. But who do you pick between the high performer of low trust and the low performer of high trust? And especially in for profit, especially in sales, where the results are so easy to see, we more often in business pick the high performer of low trust. And though they may be an individual all-star, it throws toxic wakes to the team around them.
Yes.
And we've seen study after study, this is a living testament of this, that you remove the toxic high performer and a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the SEAL, here's a perfect example of this. One of the activities you do in BUDS, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, is you hop into the pool, you swim from one end of the pool to the other, touch the other end and swim back all underwater. It's a skill assessment to see one's lung capacity and swimming ability. There's one SEAL in training who hops in, sinks to the bottom like a rock, walks across the bottom of the pool, touches the other end, turns around, walks back, and comes out nearly drowning. And the drill sergeant, who literally previously said, "What the fuck is this kid doing?" They yank him out of the water and they say, "Sailor, what are you doing?" And he said, "I don't know how to swim." And they went, "Oh, we can teach you that." They wonderfully displayed that they had the attributes of what it meant to be a successful SEAL.
Yes.
Swimming, we can teach you.
Yes.
Well, while I would
Yes.
never recommend, Laura, you should really hire someone as your CFO who's never read a balance sheet in their life. Not a good choice. But between the most proficient balance sheet reader in the world, who is emotionally unintelligent and a jerk, versus the one who's pretty good, but a fantastic, emotionally intelligent people leader, 10 times out of 10, I'd suggest take the one who's a great leader, the skills we can upskill, or we can hire a great team that supports that leader of people.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that you may know that I'm a competitive rower. And when I first started rowing about 5 years ago, I was not very good at it. And I was a little too big for my britches, and I tried out for this competitive team, and I made the team. And afterwards I said to the coach, I'm like, "So was that a typo? Did I really make the team?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You can't row for shit." He's like, "But you've got attitude." It's like, you are fit, you have attitude, you've got grit, you've got results. Because I could teach you how to row. He's like, "I can't teach you the culture piece. I can't teach you how to be a member of this team, but I can teach you the skills that you need to perform once you're on the team." And that was really that was the thing about rowing is that when you're in a boat, if you're screwing up, the whole boat fails, right? So it's not Navy SEALs level of importance, but you have to have this level of trust. So in fact, we have on the back of our t-shirts on the rowing team like a drawing of a boat of 8 rowers, and it says, "For you I will." Right. And so, like, you are exhausted and you are coming towards the end of a race and you don't know if you have another stroke in you, but you look up at the back of the woman in front of you and you see, "For you I will." And it's like, yeah, and you go.
Yeah. Sometimes SEALs row though, so you never know. I'm gonna plug this book because this is where that skills versus attributes comes from. This is my friend Rich Davini, who's a retired SEAL. And I've learned a ton about leadership and team building from him. So
Yes.
that's
And
the
the book is called
conversation.
The Attributes for
The
those who are
attributes.
listening.
Yes, the attributes. Yeah,
Excellent.
great book.
Okay. So here we are. We're back in the office. You've had that conversation with the boss. I really want to have this conversation. Then where do you start, right? Like, how you've bridged the conversation, but do we do the compliment sandwich nonsense? Do we,
Hmm.
just plow right in? Like, how
Yeah.
do we, because in a way, we are role modeling for this person how they should be behaving.
You're saying so now we're back, I'm giving you feedback and
Yes.
you're my boss. I mean,
Yes.
it's really hard and it's biologically backwards,
Yes.
right? Because we're a hierarchical species and I'm
Yes.
hardwired to offer you deference because you have positional power over me, you know? Ideally, this is how it should go. Ideally, you and I have our one-on-one meeting or we go out for our quarterly lunch or whatever it might be. And you would say to me, "Hey, Shed, I know I lead you, um, but I'm only as effective as the feedback that I get. I
Mhm.
really want an honest assessment. How am I doing? In fact, I know that sometimes I can get overbearing and micromanaging. It comes from a good place, but I know it's getting in my way. Can we have that conversation?" That's how it goes best versus
Yes.
me having to build up the courage to be like, "LGO, I want to have a conversation of feedback," right?
Yes, and what you did there is you opened the door, you invited the feedback, you gave one small example without, like, a ton of self-flagellation and, like, "Oh, I'm the worst boss ever," so the person has to be like, "No, you're great."
Yeah.
Right? You gave, like, a small example and then invited again the feedback.
I once heard Patrick Lencioni give a talk at an Art of event, which I know you've spoken at
Yes.
Art of before as well. They do great work, great events. So Patrick Lencioni, what are the books? Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Is that him? I think
Yes, I
that's
think
him.
so.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Five Dysfunctions of a Team. So he shared this amazing story of he was working with a founder CEO. They did a peer review, like a 360 assessment, and the feedback came back to him that he's not a good listener, and that he doesn't give people space to share their ideas and opinions. And so Patrick had debriefed this feedback with this CEO. He got into a room with the CEO and the CEO's direct reports, 15 people or whatever it might be. And the CEO, they're going to debrief this and have a conversation about how to become better leaders and people for each other. And the CEO gets in the room and said, "I received this feedback, but none of you feel that way, right?" And they all went, "No, boss. Yeah, you're all good."
Oh, wow.
That's a wonderful way of just totally discounting all of that. So
Yes.
so one of the great ways to create a speak up culture is for leaders to show their infallibility and with genuinely saying, "I want to improve," meaning it, and even going so far to call them out, self-criticize on, for me personally, I know sometimes I can be too collaborative and put too much onus and decision making on people and not being decisive enough. I know that about me. Can you please tell me about experiences where I've gotten in the way, where you've just wanted an answer from me and I kept saying, "What do you think?" to the point that it wasn't helpful? Like,
Yes.
let's talk about that and how we can get better at that.
Okay, so what about the role of bias in all of this? So unconscious and conscious bias when you're looking for peer review or any kind of feedback, any kind of speak of culture, because different cultures are people are different. I mean, I
Mhm.
am a super confrontational averse person. I do not want to have confrontation, but if you come after one of my team members, I will take you down, right? Like
Mm,
I am protective, but I will not I will just roll over and not protect myself. In those 20 years of doing executive search, I talk to people about why they do the work they do, mission
mhm,
driven work, and everybody cried in my office telling me a story about that teacher, the parent, the grandparent, the coach, the major disaster in the world, the diagnosis that they got, whatever the thing was, except for black women. Black
mm,
women never cried. Black men would cry, Latino men, Latino women, like, everybody black women never cried, and
mm,
I believe, I mean, thousands of people that I interviewed, that black women have to be so much more
mm.
armored and put together and perfect than everyone else, and so being able to create relationships where there's transparency and trust and openness, I think everybody
Yeah,
does it differently, like my old Jewish boss from the Bronx would, like, argue with me, and I'm like, stop confronting me, and he's like, we're just having a conversation, right? So everybody is different in the way that they interact with each other. So what's the role of bias in this peer review or this feedback, this culture creation
yeah.
process?
Well, I mean, so we all have bias. For anyone who says they don't, you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's just your bias speaking.
Exactly.
I've even heard people say, "Oh, I don't see color." when
It's
it
so
comes to
offensive. Yeah.
perceptions of race.
Yes.
And it's like, well, it's wonderful that you work very hard to treat people as human beings, but you must realize that you operate within an oppressive system and structure. So if you
Yes.
just say, oh, I don't see color, you're abdicating your responsibility and perpetuating an oppressive system. So you
Yes.
better see color.
Yes.
Now, if you said, I only hire people who cry about their mentors, and for some reason Black women don't cry about their mentors, so I don't hire them, that would be a destructive bias. But after 3, 4, 5, you're like, huh, Black women never cry. But it's not because they don't care. It's because I've made up this hypothesis that they have to be strong,
Yes.
right? And so I'm willing to see through that. I'm willing to work harder to see them because there's merit there, right?
Yes.
That's you understanding working on a bias. um it's so much of bias is being aware of it, and then when your actions conflict with your values because of a bias, that's the time to clean it up. That's the time to ask for help,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So yeah, we all have bias. And the way we navigate it is by building more relationship to it and go, oh snap.
Hmm.
When I see that name or that picture or hear that story or whatever it might be, I automatically jump to, and that's inconsistent with who I say I am. I got to clean that one up.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, if so, when you were in I mean, because I feel like creating the speak up culture uh, is a lot safer when everybody looks like you, thinks like you, acts like you, prays like you, right, loves like you. But when you have people who are different in a world where everyone is afraid that the quote woke mob is going to come after them and cancel them,
Hmm.
does it make it harder to have a speak up culture where, you may be calling some things out that you might be called oversensitive about, or, undersensitive about, or yeah, what is the role of, I mean, speak up culture is such, I'm so excited about your book and I'm so glad it's coming out right now, because I do feel like there is a whole new way that we need to learn how to speak up and speak to each other
Yeah.
in the workplace around this.
Yeah. Megan Wrights, who's a PhD out of the UK, I believe, has done amazing work on this. And she's been working on employee voice and speak up culture for far longer than I have, like 10 years. And she's just made this link between speak up culture and employee activism, which a lot of organizations and leaders are now saying we want to speak up culture. And then employees go, great, can we talk about gender equity? Can we talk about racial discrimination? Can we talk about climate change? Can we talk about abortion? Can we talk, right? And it's like, oh, no. And it's
Not about
like,
those things. No, no.
no,
Yeah.
right? And if it's like, well, that's not about our business. It's like, well, does it impact how your people show up to work? Yeah, it's
Yes.
about your business.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, we've seen backlashes of organizations who say we can't talk about politics, we can't talk about this or that, and then significant chunks of their employee population resign and leave. And so, um, uh, having greater diversity of the people at the table as opposed to groupthink, because we all come from this, we all went to Harvard, right?
Right.
It gives you greater perspective. Of course, it is harder because you might say something that is totally insensitive, but you had no idea. And it is not the responsibility of the marginalized population to say, hey, you offended me. We
Right.
actually have to work collectively in an appropriate way to say, hey, LGO, I know this wasn't your intention, but when you said that, it actually could really impact people in this way. And then you need to go, and become curious and clean it up,
Mm.
and get better. But what's wonderful about this is, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. It's not just a nice to have, and it's not just the right thing to do. It's actually very good for business, because it means you have a more holistic, diverse view, which represents, by the way, your customers and end users.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so if you have um, a very uniform and you have a very homogenous employee population, you're just going to miss out on better ways to serve others and meet customers and meet new populations. Um, Another thing that my friend Rich Schiavini speaks about is dynamic subordination, or he calls it alpha swapping as well, which is Oftentimes in our organizations, there's a problem or there's an opportunity, and who steps up and who leads. And it's not always the most senior. It's oftentimes the person who's closest to the problem or the issue, which is, oh, there's an issue. Do I just go, it's not in my domain, I'm just going to walk away? Or do I actually address it and do the best that I can and call for help or whatever it might be? Also, it's not just proximity, it's also experience and qualifications. Like, who's the best person to lead? A friend of mine who's a retired Royal Air Force pilot, when he was very junior in his career, like 23 or 25 years old or something, they were flying a plane in which one of the gear didn't come down for their landing on their final approach. And they went up and did all the things to try to get the wheel down. They were running out of fuel. The wheel still wasn't down. And the more senior captain, who was probably 45 years old or something, had way more hours flying, said to my friend, who was all but in mid-20s, he said, you take the controls, because he had way more recent flying experience on that plane. He was the right person to know how to maneuver it, because though the other guy had more hours in his career, my friend Peter had tons of hours recently. And he took the controls, and it was the right call. Fortunately, the final gear just came down at the last moment, and it was the most smooth landing of his career. But that's a wonderful example of a leader having the confidence and the humility to go, I'm aware that I'm not the best person in this cockpit to land this thing.
Yes.
Do it, and I have your back.
Yes. I just watched the most recent Top Gun movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, I guess this is a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler. Tom Cruise saves the day in the end. Big shocker, right?
Yeah.
But the whole story is that he's brought in to teach these young, Top Guns how to, go do this incredibly dangerous mission. And at the end of the day, he's the only one who can do it. So he does it. And, and I watched that and I was like, what a terrible leadership lesson this movie is. It's just this, like, the cult of leadership and the ego and all of the rest. So I want to talk a little bit about that, the sort of the cult of leadership we have. We talked about Elon Musk earlier. There are a lot of leaders right now who are sort of looked up to as the leader, right? They are the ones, they know everything. But the only way you can get to know everything is if you listen more, right? You learn more. So if you are a leader, let me preface this by saying, I remember the very first time I took my entire team out to lunch, and there were like, 14 of us at that point. And I sat down, and, I got there like after everybody else, and I looked at the table, and there was only the seat at the head of the table left. And I'm like, I guess I'll sit there, which was super weird because, like, I was a very uncomfortable CEO. And then everybody, like, didn't want to order until I ordered. And then the food came and nobody ate until I started eating. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I was like, oh God, I'm a leader. Oh no, what do I do? And it became this very heavy experience where I realized that every single thing I did was setting the tone. How I responded to emails, when I responded to emails, at what time of day I responded to emails, how fast I responded to emails. That set a tone. How I spoke at client events, how I made presentations, and they were all trying to be me.
Yep.
And they sucked at being me. And that's not because I'm awesome. It's because I'm just me. I'm great at being me. I could never be you, Shed. You could never be me. And it wasn't until I sort of realized that they were trying to imitate me in this sort of cult of leadership fashion that I was like, okay, Shed, you're the expert. I want you to be the best Shed you can be. Don't be the best LGO you can be. Be the best Shed you can be. And so in this world of sort of leadership porn, right? This, like, we have this fantastical idea of what the leader should be.
Yeah.
How do we, as we're growing and trying to find our own leadership voice, how do we figure out who we are?
Oh, I love that. It's a great question. So first and foremost, I said this previously, but as a leader, a whisper is a shout.
Yes.
So if you call my office, and I don't have an assistant here, I'm in my basement, but let's say I did, and they're like, hey, it's LGO on the phone. Do you want to take it? And I'm like, tell her I'm not here. I've just said everyone in this organization can lie.
Yes.
Right? So a whisper is a shout, and everyone's watching, everyone's listening, right? Everyone's looking. So first and foremost, I love that you have this sort of awareness of, oh my God, everyone's trying to copy me. I don't want them
And I
to.
didn't even think I was doing that good of a job at the time. Like, I was still trying to figure out what the hell I was doing.
Yeah. And so, you know, for you as leader at that lunch to be like, hey, I've noticed that, you know, I happen to be sitting at the head. I noticed that no one started eating until I started eating. I noticed that I was the first, like, yada, yada, yada. I don't want that to be the case. I want you to order first. I want you to be who you are. My job as a leader is not to breed more of me. Yikes. You know, how good are we going to be then? My job as a leader is, again, as a leader, figure out our instrument, figure out how we best play our instrument, which includes strengths, which includes weaknesses, and includes blind spots, right? Similarly, once you figure out what your instrument is and you're brutally honest with your team, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses. Please feel free to inform me on my on my blind spots. My job is to help you find yours. I'm not going to do it on my own. We have assessments that we utilize in our leadership development, strengths finders or Jonathan Field's spark type or whatever it might
Yes.
be, you know. We're going to invest in a leadership development program, which need not be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Everyone on the team can suggest a book that you think can make this culture and workplace better. And we're going to do a book club where we read a chapter or 3 and then we talk about it on Friday afternoons. You know, for those of you who want it, we're going to invest in coaching. You know, like it's not one. I can't make you play your instrument. All I can do is create a condition in which you can figure out what your instrument is, and we can support you in playing it to the best of your ability. Oh, and by the way, we're an orchestra, so we all better help others find and hone and work on their instruments as well.
So I love that last, I mean, I love all of what you said, but that last piece I think is fascinating to me. You know, as you know, I just finished this 3-year study, an assessment where I had, you know, 5,600 people take a long, convoluted assessment about what actually inspires them and engages them at work. And one of the things that I found was that less than half of workers feel like they're their very best version of themselves at work. Less than half,
Mhm.
like 40%.
Yeah.
And what they also said, though, is that when they are their very best version of themselves at work, they feel like they're doing work that matters. They feel like work represents who they are. They feel like that they're appreciated in their work. They feel like they understand the quality of how their work impacts, you know, the bottom line. They actually help build up everyone else around them, right? So when people feel like they are the very best versions of themselves at work, they create better teams. So it's like it's not just I have to invest in this one individual, but that there's
Mhm.
this ripple effect for everybody. But that means not like I am the most productive person at work. It's I am the very best version of myself at work.
Yes, which and as human beings, we live a paradox. We're always individuals and parts of groups
Yes.
simultaneously. And the test of a strong culture is more often than not, do we do what's in the best interest of the group,
Yes.
right? Even and those amongst us who are leaders are willing to sacrifice our own personal interest to do what's right for the group. And what do we earn is loyalty. And that people are willing to sacrifice for us because we've set the example and have sacrificed for them. So you're totally bang on. I mean, it's what does it say in the back of the rowing T-shirt again?
For you, I will.
For you, I will.
Yeah.
Like, what an amazing team mantra.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. So,
So, what about the sort of subjugation of our own goals and desires sometimes to the broader team? So, as a leader,
mhm,
I know that my team really wants to like take this car out on the road and see how fast it's going to run. As a leader, my job is to like continue to innovate and iterate and make the car better. And at some point, the better I get at my job, the further out I am ahead of the market, right? My job as CEO is to be 18 to 24 months ahead of the market, figuring
yeah,
out solutions to the problems my clients don't even realize they have right now.
mhm.
My team members, though, if they're really good, their job is to be focused on today, this report, this project, this product, whatever it is. And so the better I am at my job and the better they are at their job, the further divorced we are in the work we do. So I have to then go into the annual, you know, retreat or the staff meeting or whatever, and I have to like hand out the Kool-Aid about the stuff that they're excited about, but doesn't really excite me that much. And then what do I do with like then I'm kinda empty. So who do I get to talk to?
Yeah. So, I mean, one, leadership can be lonely. It doesn't have to be, but it can be.
Hmm.
And so, encourage you as CEO, founder, leader to have a peer group, which is likely to be external to the organization.
Yes.
Part of this could be your board. Part of this could be your YPO group or your EO or some sort
Hmm.
of, I have a friend who's a brilliant, amazing CEO, and he's just joined a CEO group that's facilitated by an amazing executive coach.
Hmm.
Good call, right?
Yes.
And he can have conversations there that are different than conversations he can have with me or his life partner or his leadership team or his board, or potential investors. The list goes on. It is a safe place, a peer group, hugely important. Then I think as well, I mean, it's Jobs and Wozniak. I think it is healthy within organizations to have someone, though I think we could talk about some of the behaviors at Apple and amongst Steve Jobs. It wasn't healthy, but it is this marriage between one whose heads are in the clouds and seeing 18, 24 months or further,
Hmm.
plus individuals who can help uh, get that up in the clouds to down on the ground, and having functional layers in between, that have it make sense, and to take that vision and make it reality. The other is, I'm just a really big believer in, I mean, the most important meetings for managers or leaders in their week are their one-on-ones with their people. And I recommend trying to do it every week, or at minimum every 2 weeks, but probably every week. Because if you miss one, right? If you miss one and it's biweekly, then you're only meeting once a month.
Yes.
How's that going to be? And the best thing to do in your one-on-ones is check in. How's it going? Anything going on inside or outside of work that's affecting how you're performing or showing up? I want to know that, right? And with responsibility, right? Vulnerability isn't sharing everything. Vulnerability is sharing with context. I, as leader, can tell them what's going
Hmm.
on in my world that might impact how I'm showing up for them. Then we make agreements. I'm not a fan of accountability. I'm a fan of agreements. What do we agree that will be done from now until our next meeting? And if the time we show up to our next meeting, it isn't done, there's an issue here, which is, it shouldn't be a surprise. We
Right.
should raise that flag such that before the next meeting, we can see if we need to delay it, solve it, put more people on it, whatever
Hmm.
it might be.
Hmm.
Um, and then, right now I have a team of one. I have many vendors and partners, but I have one person on my team.
Yes.
I talk to them about their dreams, their goals, their visions, their aspirations, both inside of profession and in life in general. They want to move countries. I see it as my responsibility to help them do that,
Hmm.
right? I hope that I have this long, amazing partnership with them. That's the intention right now. But if something were to happen and we figure out, no, he's meant to do this, that, or the other, I'm going to help him do that.
Yes.
Why would I limit him? And so I think leaders also need to figure out, someone might be in a management function or head, do the report, do the thing. But have you had a conversation with them and realize, actually, they're really good at the visionary piece?
Yes.
Maybe there's a succession. Maybe they can spin off and start a new department or function, or maybe I can help them do their own startup and they'll hire us as a client, or a vendor. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Or even the opposite. I had somebody who worked for me once where I was like, "You're incredible. You're amazing. I want to promote you, promote you, promote you." And she was like, "I don't want you to promote me. I want to have a baby, and then I want to have a second baby, and I want to stay in this job and be an expert in this job because I know I can do this job. I don't know that I can do that job as mom, and until I figure out that job, I want to stay here. But as soon as
nice.
my kids are in,
Yeah,
elementary school, I'm in." And I've since sold the firm, and I get reports from my former colleagues there, and she's now been promoted. She's a vice president. She's kicking ass. But
nice.
you think your job as a leader is like, how do I grow my person, grow my person, grow my person? And sometimes you just need your person to be the person they want to be.
Yeah.
And like that's your job too.
Yep, totally. And it takes two to tango. You like, kudos to you for having that, being like, I see this for you, and them going, I see this for me right now.
Yes,
And it's like,
yes, yes.
I would set you and me and all of us up for failure if I actually promoted you into this job that you don't want right now.
Exactly, exactly, and we would all not understand where things why it wasn't working. So this is absolutely fantastic. What let me ask you one brass tacks question because I'm sure
Mhm.
every leader listening is like, "Oh God, more meetings." How long do those meetings have to be?
They have to be as long as they need to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
it's
we're not
like
talking like an hour with every single person every single week.
no, but it might be that sometimes it needs to be an hour. Sometimes it can be an 8-minute meeting, and we're like, "All right, we've gotten what we need to get to, 30 minutes." But I would suggest leaving some buffer. I'm a big
Yes.
fan of building buffer into my calendar, 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after, so that I'm not late for the next, and I might even have a moment to take a 5-minute pause or break, which does
Sure.
wonder for our brains.
Right, and I mean, talk about psychological safety, like, being able to be fully present and not like, "I gotta rush you through your hopes and dreams," conversation, right? Like,
Right.
that is talk about a whisper being a shout.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a distinction between a finished conversation versus a complete conversation. So in my one-on-ones, which, hey, we've scheduled 30 minutes, and it's like, ooh, there's a there. Let us put a pin in that. I think that deserves a 90-minute conversation. And in fact, I'd like to do it on a walk in nature with you. How does that sound? You know?
Oh,
Um,
I what a delicious gift for everybody who's listened all the way through. There are complete conversations and finished conversations. That is so good.
well, and if you want to improve your communication, track them, right? Finished is I've got to run to my next thing logistically, but I'm aware that this is not a complete conversation. A complete conversation, they're rare, but we have them where we're like, nothing more
Yes.
needs to be said. And so when you're in
Yes.
a finished conversation, say, I'm aware that we're finished. We have these pieces that we're yet to be complete on. Let's circle back. How's Thursday morning? Great, let's do it. Your effectiveness as a leader will skyrocket.
Amazing. I wanna come work for you, Shed. You'd be a
Deal. I
great
want
leader.
to work for you.
So I could talk to you forever, but we are unfortunately out of time. Shed, where can people come find you if they're listening today and they want to know more about you and your upcoming book, Speak Up Culture?
Thank you, LGO, and we will continue this conversation. You and I are. I'm bringing you over to my channel. I think it's
Yes.
June 22nd. I want to say, but I'll confirm that.
Yes.
But it's on my LinkedIn page. So if you want to come and see the tables turn, we
Part
will do that.
2.
Yeah. Shed Inspires is the website as it's up there. I believe for the time being, I'm the only Stephen Shedletzky in the entire world, as you are probably the only LGO in the entire world. So if you Google my name, you'll find all the things. Most active on LinkedIn, but more on the website as well.
Amazing. Shed, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great fun and I've learned a ton.
Amazing. This was a treat. So good, and look forward to more.